The 14th century was a period of significant turmoil and crisis, marked by conflicts that reshaped Europe both politically and spiritually. One of the most prominent events of this era was the Hundred Years' War, a prolonged and devastating conflict between England and France that would define the late medieval period. This lesson will delve into the complexities of this war, exploring how it represented a major political crisis in late medieval Europe. In addition to the political upheaval of the Hundred Years' War, the 14th century was also characterized by a profound crisis within the Roman Catholic Church. However, we will first turn our attention to the geopolitical struggles of the period, beginning with the Hundred Years' War, to understand how these concurrent crises interplayed to shape the course of European history in the 14th century. The roots of the Hundred Years' War, a defining conflict of the 14th and 15th centuries, can be traced back to 1328, following the death of Charles IV of France, the last king of the Capetian dynasty, who left no male heir. This succession crisis sparked competing claims to the French throne, which would ultimately lead to prolonged conflict between France and England. Two primary claimants emerged: Philip of Valois, a French nobleman and a distant relative of the Capetians, and Edward III of England, who claimed the throne through his mother, Isabella, the sister of the deceased French king. Philip's claim was based on a male lineage, while Edward's was through a female line. Despite Edward's closer familial connection, the French crown favored Philip of Valois, who was ultimately chosen as king. Initially, Edward III accepted Philip's ascension, but tensions soon escalated, prompting Edward to reconsider his position. The catalyst for Edward's change of heart lay in Flanders, a region under French dominion but economically tied to England through its wool trade. The Count of Flanders, a vassal of the French king, and the broader French influence were deeply unpopular among the Flemish, whose thriving textile industry relied heavily on English wool imports. Flemish cities, eager to diminish French control, saw Edward III as a potential liberator and expressed their support for his claim to the French throne. They warned Edward that, unless he pursued his claim, they would cease their lucrative wool trade with England, a critical economic lever. Edward's initial reluctance stemmed from his substantial land holdings in France, remnants of the Norman conquests, which had been a long-standing source of friction between the English and French crowns. However, the situation took a decisive turn when Philip VI of France, seeking to assert his authority, renewed hostilities by invading English-held territories in France. This aggressive action convinced Edward III that asserting his claim to the French throne was not only a matter of dynastic right, but also a necessary step to protect his interests and respond to French provocations. Thus, what began as a dispute over succession evolved into a broader conflict fueled by national rivalries, economic interests, and long-standing territorial disputes. The Hundred Years' War would not only redefine the political landscape of France and England, but also mark a period of profound upheaval across Europe. The Hundred Years' War was marked by significant military innovations, most notably the English use of the longbow, a formidable weapon that played a crucial role in their early successes. The longbow, with its high range and rapid rate of fire, proved devastating against the heavily armored French knights, who had previously dominated medieval battlefields. This technological advantage allowed the English to secure major victories in key battles, including the Battle of Crécy in 1346, the Battle of Poitiers in 1356, and the Battle of Agincourt in 1415. These decisive victories not only highlighted the effectiveness of the English longbowmen, but also demonstrated the shifting nature of warfare, where traditional knightly combat was increasingly supplanted by ranged and infantry tactics. By the early 15th century, England appeared poised to secure a conclusive victory, with English forces controlling significant portions of France. However, the tide of the war dramatically changed with the emergence of a peasant girl from Domremy, who would later be known as Joan of Arc. Claiming divine guidance, Joan inspired the French troops and revitalized French morale, leading them to a series of unexpected and pivotal victories. Her leadership was instrumental in lifting the siege of Orléans in 1429, a turning point that shifted momentum in favor of the French. Joan of Arc's involvement galvanized the French cause, and under her influence, the French forces embarked on a renewed campaign that culminated in the recapture of nearly all English-held territories on the mainland by 1453. This marked the effective end of the Hundred Years' War, with the French emerging victorious. Despite the French reclaiming most of their territory, neither the English nor the French monarchy emerged from the conflict unscathed. Both kingdoms were left weakened, with exhausted resources and internal strife that would shape their respective futures. The Hundred Years' War not only transformed the military landscape of medieval Europe, but also had profound social, economic, and political consequences, setting the stage for the end of feudalism and the rise of nation-states. The early 14th century witnessed a series of crises that significantly weakened the authority of the Roman Catholic Church, largely due to increasing interference by the French monarchy. This period of papal subjugation to French influence, known as the Avignon Papacy or the Babylonian Captivity, marked a turning point in church history with lasting consequences. The crisis began with a conflict between Pope Boniface VIII and King Philip IV of France, which centered around issues of papal authority and taxation. Following the death of Boniface VIII, his successor, Pope Benedict XI, served briefly for just 8 months before his death. In 1305, the papal conclave elected Clement V, a Frenchman, as the new pope. Rather than relocating to Rome, Clement V chose to remain in France, establishing his papal court in Avignon, in southern France. Officially, this move was justified by the unrest and lack of order in Rome. However, it was widely understood that Clement's decision was heavily influenced by the pressures exerted by the French crown. During the Avignon Papacy, the popes were increasingly perceived as being under the influence of the French monarchy, which severely undermined the Church's authority and independence. The relocation to Avignon also resulted in significant financial losses, as the papacy was cut off from its traditional revenues from Italian territories, many of which declared independence from papal rule given the pope's absence from Rome. To compensate for these financial losses, the Avignon popes introduced new methods of raising funds, such as the sale of indulgences and various church taxes, which were imposed on ordinary Christians across Europe. These financial practices contributed to the perception of the papacy as greedy and corrupt, fueling widespread resentment and anti-clerical sentiment. The papal presence in Avignon, lasting from 1309 to 1377, came to be seen by many as a period of moral and spiritual decline, with the popes viewed as puppets of the French king. This perception not only alienated the faithful, but also emboldened secular rulers across Europe, who increasingly challenged the authority of the Church. In 1378, in a bid to restore the Church's legitimacy and respond to mounting criticism, Pope Gregory XI decided to return the papacy to Rome. Although this move was initially successful, Pope Gregory XI died shortly after the return, leading to yet another crisis, the Great Schism. The Great Schism, lasting from 1378 to 1417, saw multiple rival claimants to the papacy, further dividing the Church and eroding its authority. This schism was characterized by a profound loss of confidence in the papal institution and set the stage for the eventual calls for reform that would erupt in the following centuries. Following the death of Pope Gregory XI in 1378, the College of Cardinals, predominantly French, elected an Italian, Urban VI, as the new pope. However, Urban VI quickly unveiled an ambitious agenda for reform within the Church, which took the cardinals by surprise and alienated many of them, especially the French faction. Dissatisfied with Urban VI's approach and reforms, these French cardinals declared his election invalid, citing alleged irregularities, and in turn elected a rival pope, Clement VII, who was French. Urban VI, unsurprisingly, refused to acknowledge his deposition, leading to a schism as both popes, Urban VI in Rome and Clement VII in Avignon, claimed to be the legitimate pontiff. This marked the beginning of the Great Schism, a profound and divisive crisis that forced European monarchies, bishops, and faithful Christians to choose sides, aligning themselves either with the Roman papacy or the Avignon papacy. The division significantly weakened the Church's unity and authority, resulting in a severe loss of prestige and influence for the papal institution as a whole. Amid this turmoil, the conciliar movement emerged, driven by a group of prominent cardinals and church leaders who advocated for a resolution to the schism through a general council. The conciliarists believed that ultimate authority within the Church should reside not with the Pope alone, but with a council representing all bishops and clergy. Their vision sought to restructure the Church's governance by diminishing the papacy's power, reducing the Pope's role to that of an advisor while vesting real authority in councils. This was a radical shift that challenged centuries of papal supremacy. The first major attempt to resolve the schism through conciliar intervention was the Council of Pisa in 1409. The council aimed to end the division by deposing both the Roman and Avignon popes and electing a new pope, Alexander V. However, this solution backfired dramatically, as neither of the existing popes recognized the authority of the council or the legitimacy of Alexander V. Instead of resolving the crisis, the Council of Pisa exacerbated it by creating a situation with three concurrent popes, one in Rome, one in Avignon, and one in Pisa. This failure only deepened the Church's disarray, showcasing the limits of conciliar efforts and the entrenched nature of papal rivalries. The Great Schism would persist until the Council of Constance from 1414 to 1418, which finally succeeded in deposing all rival claimants and electing Martin V as the sole pope, thus restoring a measure of unity to the Church. However, the damage inflicted by the schism, both in terms of lost prestige and the questioning of papal authority, had lasting effects, setting the stage for future calls for reform and the eventual emergence of Protestantism in the 16th century. The conciliar movement itself, while ultimately unsuccessful in permanently reducing papal power, underscored the growing desire within the Church for greater accountability and shared governance. The Council of Constance from 1414 to 1418 was convened under immense pressure from the Holy Roman Emperor Sigismund and represented a renewed effort by the conciliar movement to address the deep crises facing the Church. Held in Constance, Switzerland, the council was tasked with resolving several urgent issues, including the widespread heresy propagated by the Bohemian reformer Jan Hus, who was condemned as a heretic and burned at the stake in 1415. However, the primary focus of the council was to resolve the Great Schism, which had left the Church divided with multiple rival popes. To restore unity, the Council of Constance deposed the existing popes and elected Martin V as the sole legitimate pope in 1417. Unlike previous attempts, such as the failed Council of Pisa, the efforts at Constance were successful in persuading or compelling the rival popes to step down, thus consolidating papal authority under Martin V. This marked the official end of the Great Schism and re-established the papacy's singular leadership over the Catholic Church. However, this resolution did not come without significant concessions. Pope Martin V was required to acknowledge the authority of the council, agreeing that the Church, including the papacy, would be subject to conciliar decrees and decisions, a principle that sought to establish a more collective governance model within the Church. While the Council of Constance succeeded in reuniting the Church and ending the schism, it did not fully resolve the underlying tensions between papal authority and conciliar governance. The conciliarists envisioned a Church where councils would have ultimate authority, thereby reducing the Pope's power to a more advisory role. Following Constance, a power struggle ensued between the Pope and the conciliar movement, as subsequent popes, including Martin V, resisted the limitations placed upon their authority. The struggle culminated in the Council of Basel from 1431 to 1449, which initially continued the conciliar agenda but eventually shifted in favor of papal authority. Through strategic alliances with secular rulers and persistent negotiations, the papacy managed to reassert its dominance. By the middle of the 15th century, the Pope had successfully reclaimed his position as the supreme head of the Church, relegating the conciliar movement to a secondary role and restoring the traditional hierarchical structure that placed the papacy at the apex of Church authority. The Council of Constance is thus a critical chapter in the history of the Catholic Church, illustrating both the potential and the limitations of conciliarism. While it managed to end the Great Schism and briefly challenged papal supremacy, the ultimate victory of the papacy at the Council of Basel underscored the enduring power of the papal office and set the stage for ongoing debates about church governance that would continue to echo in the calls for reform leading up to the Protestant Reformation. In our upcoming lectures, we will shift our focus from the crises of the 14th century to exploring the emergence of the Renaissance, a period of profound cultural, artistic, and intellectual revival that began in Italy during the 14th and 15th centuries. These lectures will delve into the various factors that contributed to the birth of the Renaissance, examining why this movement originated in Italy rather than in other European countries such as France or England. We will explore the unique conditions in Italy that fostered this flourishing of art and thought, including the region's rich classical heritage, its strategic geographic location, and its vibrant urban centers that served as hubs of trade, wealth, and intellectual exchange. Additionally, we will consider the role of influential patrons, such as the Medici family, whose support of the arts and humanist scholarship played a crucial role in shaping the Renaissance. Our discussion will also address the broader socio-political and economic context that made Italy the cradle of the Renaissance, such as the relative political fragmentation that allowed for diverse and competitive city-states, each eager to display their prestige through artistic and architectural achievements. By contrasting these factors with the conditions in France and England, we will seek to understand why the Renaissance did not initially take root in these regions, and how Italy's distinctive environment created a fertile ground for this transformative cultural movement.